The red warning lights bathed the Earth Defense Network Command Center in an ominous glow as Captain Jake Morrison stared at the incoming transmission with disbelief. 23 years of military service had prepared him for many things, but nothing could have readied him for this moment. His calloused hands gripped the edge of the command console so tightly his knuckles turned white. The metal groaning under the pressure of his mounting rage, the alien symbols cascaded across the main display like digital rain, each character being processed by humanity's most advanced translation algorithms. Morrison watched in horror as the computer slowly decoded what would become the most devastating message in human history. His weathered face, scarred by decades of combat missions, twisted into an expression of pure fury as the implications became clear. "Commander Sarah Blake, you need to see this immediately," he barked into his communication unit, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. The urgency in his tone cut through the usual military protocol like a knife through silk. This wasn't just another routine briefing, this was the moment everything changed. Blake was reviewing supply reports in her adjacent office when Morrison's voice crackled through the intercom. The desperation she heard made her blood freeze. In all their years serving together, she had never heard that particular tone from the unflappable captain. Something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. She abandoned her paperwork and sprinted through the corridors of the underground facility. Her boots echoing against the polished concrete floors, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with her mounting anxiety. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she burst through the communications bay doors. "What are we dealing with, Captain?" she demanded, her chest heaving from the sprint. Her eyes immediately locked onto the alien text flooding their screens. Symbols that looked both beautiful and terrifying in their otherworldly complexity. Morrison turned to face her, his steel-gray eyes blazing with an anger she had never seen before. "These things have been studying us for 3 years, Sarah. 3 entire years of secret observation, cataloging, and analysis." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "They've classified every animal on Earth as a living weapon, and they think we're too dangerous to make contact with." The words hit Blake like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what Morrison had just revealed. After decades of humanity searching the cosmos for signs of intelligent life, sending out radio signals and launching space probes with messages of peace and friendship, their first cosmic neighbors had been watching them in silence. Worse, they had reached a conclusion that could spell doom for every person on the planet. "That's impossible," she whispered. But even as the words left her lips, she knew Morrison wouldn't joke about something this serious. The dream of peaceful first contact, the fantasy that had inspired countless movies and books, was crumbling before their eyes like a house of cards in a hurricane. You know what's funny about first contact scenarios in science fiction? They always assume the aliens will be either benevolent teachers or obvious conquerors. Nobody ever considered that they might be terrified zoologists who think our golden retrievers are military assets. Morrison continued reading from the translated document, his voice growing more strained with each revelation. According to their research, Earth's biosphere represents the most sophisticated weapons development facility they've ever encountered. They believe we've unconsciously created a planet-wide biological armory. Blake felt the world spinning around her as the implications sank in. From an alien perspective, Earth must indeed look like a weapons laboratory. Tigers, with their perfect killing machines, sharks that had remained unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfect predators, eagles, with their incredible vision and aerial superiority. Even the humble house cat, with its retractable claws and night vision, could seem like a miniature assassin to beings from a peaceful world. "Sir, there's more," whispered Lieutenant Tom Bradley from his monitoring station. His usually steady hand shook as he adjusted his headset, his face pale with absolute terror. Bradley was fresh out of the academy, barely 25 years old. This was supposed to be a routine assignment monitoring deep space communications. Morrison and Blake turned toward him with dread, knowing that whatever came next would somehow be worse than what they had already learned. The young lieutenant's voice cracked as he delivered the final blow. "They're not just classifying us as dangerous, sir. The Galactic Science Consortium has voted. They're recommending a preemptive strike against Earth before we can develop interstellar travel capabilities." The silence that followed was deafening. The constant hum of computers and ventilation systems seemed to fade into nothingness as the three humans absorbed the weight of this revelation. Humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence had resulted in their own death sentence. Blake's training kicked in despite her shock. "How long do we have?" Bradley's fingers flew over his keyboard as he searched through the intercepted communications. "The recommendation has been sent to something called the Galactic Defense Council. If approved, they estimate the strike could be authorized within their equivalent of 6 Earth months." Morrison slammed his fist against the console again, this time with enough force to crack the reinforced glass display. "Right. 6 months to prove we're not the monsters they think we are. 6 months to convince an alien civilization that our love for animals doesn't make us galactic threats." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Humanity's greatest strength, their ability to form bonds with other species, to love and protect creatures that could theoretically harm them, had been interpreted as their greatest weakness. The very thing that made them human had marked them for extinction. But here's the thing about humans that these alien observers didn't understand yet. When faced with impossible odds, when backed into a corner with no apparent escape, humanity has always found a way to fight back. The question wasn't whether they would try to change the aliens' minds. The question was whether they could do it before the countdown reached 0. As the three officers stood in the red-lit command center, staring at the alien text that spelled out their species' doom, one thing became crystal clear. The next 6 months would determine whether humanity's story ended in tragedy or triumph. The real battle for Earth's survival was just beginning. Want to discover how small actions can lead to massive results over time? Check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding and how it can transform your life. Just like how humanity's small acts of kindness toward animals might just save our entire species. Dr. Emily Carter's hands trembled uncontrollably as she scrolled through the most terrifying document in human history. The soft glow of her computer screen illuminated her pale face in the darkened laboratory, casting shadows that seemed to dance with her mounting horror.
Oh.
As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent her entire career dreaming of this moment. Discovery of alien intelligence, but nothing in her wildest nightmares had prepared her for this. The intercepted research files contained 3 years of meticulous alien observation, cataloging, and analysis of Earth's ecosystem. Every page revealed another layer of humanity's impending doom, each scientific notation bringing them closer to extinction. Carter's breath came in short gasps as she realized the scope of what she was reading, the most comprehensive biological survey ever conducted, and it painted humanity as the galaxy's greatest threat. "They documented everything," she whispered to General Marcus Williams, who paced furiously behind her like a caged tiger. The irony of that comparison wasn't lost on her, given what she was reading. Williams had been called in from the Pentagon. The moment the files were decoded, his military bearing barely containing the volcanic rage building inside him, Carter's voice barely carried across the sterile laboratory as she continued reading. "Our tigers, sharks, eagles, they see them all as biological weapons. Every creature we consider magnificent, they've classified as a potential instrument of war." Williams stopped pacing abruptly, his polished boots clicking against the linoleum floor. His jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in his neck stood out like steel cables. "And they think we're weaponizing them?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Carter's voice cracked with fear as she delivered the devastating truth that would change everything. "Worse, they believe we've unconsciously created the most dangerous biological arsenal in the galaxy." She turned her monitor toward Williams, her finger trembling as she pointed to the alien classifications. "Look at this. Octopus Stealth Reconnaissance Unit with Distributed Intelligence. Electric Eel Bioelectric Warfare Specialist. Bombardier. Beetle Chemical Weapons Platform." Williams leaned closer, his eyes widening as he read the clinical descriptions of Earth's wildlife. Each entry read like a military equipment manual, describing capabilities that would make any general salivate. the octopus's ability to change color and texture for perfect camouflage, solve complex puzzles, and regenerate lost limbs, the electric eel's capacity to generate 600 volts of electricity on command, the bombardier beetle's ability to mix chemicals in its body and spray boiling poison at attackers. You know what's really crazy about this situation? You've been worried about aliens having superior technology, but it turns out they're terrified of our pets. Imagine trying to explain to your insurance company that your homeowner's policy needs to cover interspecies diplomatic incidents involving Fluffy. The room fell silent except for the constant hum of computers processing the alien data streams. Williams felt a chill run down his spine as the full implications began to sink in. Every nature documentary he had ever watched, every trip to the zoo with his grandchildren, every peaceful moment spent fishing, all of it was being reinterpreted through the lens of alien observers who saw weapons where humans saw beauty. They're not wrong, Carter continued, her voice barely audible above the mechanical sounds surrounding them. From an alien perspective, Earth does look like a weapons laboratory, and they think we're the ultimate predators controlling it all. The weight of this revelation crashed over them like a tsunami. Humanity had always imagined that their technological advancement would be their defining characteristic to alien observers. Instead, it was their biological coexistence that had marked them for destruction. The very thing that made Earth unique. Incredible diversity of life forms that had evolved together was being interpreted as a sophisticated weapons program. Williams studied the alien analysis of human behavior, his military mind beginning to understand their perspective. According to this, they observed a child walking a German shepherd, and classified it as juvenile human conducting tactical exercises with canine assault unit. His voice grew more strained with each word. They watched families at petting zoos and documented it as civilian population conducting weapons familiarization training. Carter scrolled through more files, her horror deepening with each revelation. They've cataloged our relationship with horses as mounted cavalry training, our marine biology research as aquatic weapons development, and our bird watching as aerial reconnaissance preparation. The scientific precision of the alien observations was both impressive and terrifying. They had documented human behavior with the same methodical approach they used to classify Earth's wildlife. But their interpretation was filtered through the lens of beings who had never encountered such biological diversity. A species that had evolved on peaceful worlds with limited predators. Earth's ecosystem appeared to be a carefully orchestrated military program. Williams slammed his hand on the desk with such force that coffee cups jumped and scattered papers flew across the room. We need to contact them immediately. This is a massive misunderstanding. But even as he spoke, Carter's expression told him everything he needed to know. The tears streaming down her face weren't just from fear, they were from the crushing weight of hopelessness. She had found something else in the files, something that made their situation even more desperate. "It's too late," she replied, her voice breaking as she pointed to a final document on her screen. "They've already voted. Earth is classified as a dormant galactic threat." The classification hung before them like a digital death sentence. Williams read the alien text with growing dread. Understanding that this wasn't just a scientific designation, it was a military assessment. The alien observers had concluded that Earth represented a potential threat to galactic stability. Not because of human technology or aggression, but because of their unprecedented biological arsenal. "There's more," Carter whispered, scrolling to the final section of the report. "They've designated Earth as a unique evolutionary anomaly and recommended immediate intervention before humanity develops. Interstellar travel capabilities." Williams felt his world crumbling around him. Everything humanity had worked towards space exploration, interstellar communication, the dream of joining a galactic community had been turned against them. Their greatest achievement, learning to coexist with nature's most magnificent creatures, had been interpreted as their greatest threat. The most chilling part wasn't the alien fear of Earth's wildlife. It was their clinical assessment of humanity itself. The files described humans as apex predators with unprecedented cooperative capabilities and biological weapons coordinators with advanced social structures. They had observed human society and concluded that any species capable of domesticating wolves, training eagles, and swimming with dolphins must possess abilities that defied conventional understanding. As Carter and Williams sat in the sterile laboratory, surrounded by the evidence of humanity's impending doom, one thing became crystal clear. The next few months would determine whether human civilization would survive to see another sunrise. The countdown to extinction had begun, and they were running out of time to change the minds of observers who had already made their decision. But here's what those alien researchers didn't understand about humans when faced with impossible odds. When everything seems lost, that's exactly when humanity discovers what it's truly capable of. The question wasn't whether they would fight back. The question was whether they could convince an entire galaxy that love, not fear, was the most powerful force in the universe. Speaking of powerful forces, have you ever wondered how small, consistent actions can create massive results over time? Check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding and discover how tiny changes can transform your entire life. It's just like how humanity's small acts of compassion might just save our entire species. The polished marble floors of the White House echoed with the thunderous footsteps of NASA Director Robert Hayes as he sprinted through the corridors like a man possessed. His usually pristine suit was wrinkled and sweat-stained, his gray hair disheveled from running his hands through it during the most stressful 12 hours of his career. The weight of humanity's future pressed down on his shoulders as he burst through the doors of the secure briefing room with the force of a man who had just discovered the key to survival. President Amanda Foster sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, surrounded by the nation's most brilliant minds and powerful leaders. The Emergency Council had been in session for 18 straight hours, their faces etched with exhaustion and desperation. Secretary of Defense Kevin Mitchell sat rigid in his chair, his military bearing barely concealing the volcanic rage building. Inside him, CIA Director Janet Morrison reviewed intelligence reports with trembling hands, while Chief of Staff David Chin coordinated with international allies who were dealing with their own versions of this crisis. Every person in that room represented decades of experience in handling national emergencies, but nothing had prepared them for this. The discovery of hostile alien intelligence had shattered every assumption about humanity's place in the universe. Their desperate hope for good news was written across their faces like a prayer. Madam President Hayes gasped, still catching his breath from his sprint through the White House corridors. His chest heaved as he struggled to compose himself, knowing that every word he spoke could determine the fate of 8 billion people. We've established communication with the alien research vessel. They're willing to talk. The room erupted in a mixture of relief and apprehension. Foster leaned forward, her knuckles white, as she gripped the edge of the table. The stress of the past day had aged her visibly, adding lines to her face that hadn't been there during her morning briefing. What do they want? Hayes moved to the large display screen, his hands shaking as he activated the translation interface. They want to understand why we coexist with what they call apex predator units. They can't comprehend why we keep dogs, cats, and horses as companions instead of weapons. The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the room owned pets, had children who played with animals, or had grown up with the understanding that animals were friends, not weapons. The alien perspective seemed so foreign, so fundamentally wrong, that it was almost incomprehensible. You know what's really mind-blowing about this situation? We spend billions of dollars on defense systems and space programs, but our biggest diplomatic crisis is about explaining why we scratch behind our dog's ears. Imagine if aliens judged us based on how we treat our houseplants. These humans water their green prisoners daily, clearly a form of biological warfare. Defense Secretary Mitchell stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that cut through the tension. His face was flushed with anger, his military training warring with the absurdity of the situation. They think our pets are military assets? Hayes nodded grimly, pulling up the alien observation files on the main screen. It gets worse. They observed a child playing with a German shepherd and classified it as juvenile human training with tactical canine unit. They watched people at zoos and assumed we were conducting weapons inspections. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. every innocent moment of human-animal interaction had been twisted into something sinister through the lens of alien observers. Children feeding ducks at the park became aquatic asset management training. Families visiting farms were conducting livestock warfare preparation. Even something as simple as a cat sleeping on someone's lap was interpreted as close-quarters reconnaissance positioning. Foster felt the weight of humanity's survival pressing down on her shoulders like a mountain. The fate of every person on Earth suddenly depended on her ability to explain something so fundamental to human nature that most people never even thought about it. Can we convince them they're wrong? Hayes shook his head grimly, his expression carrying the weight of doom. They've spent 3 years building this assessment. Their lead scientist, Dr. Zekthara, believes we're either the most dangerous species in the galaxy or the most innocent. And they're not willing to bet on innocent. The room fell silent as the full scope of their predicament became clear. Humanity's first contact with alien intelligence had resulted in a cosmic game of Russian roulette, where the stakes were the survival of their entire species. The aliens had 2 theories about humanity, and they were prepared to act on the assumption that humans were the greater threat. CIA Director Morrison leaned forward, her analytical mind working through the problem. Hayes pulled up more files, his voice growing more strained with each revelation. According to their communications, they've documented what they call unprecedented biological cooperation patterns. They've observed humans rescuing injured wildlife, protecting endangered species, and even risking their lives to save animals that could theoretically harm them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Humanity's greatest strength, their capacity for compassion and cooperation with other species, had been interpreted as either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity. The aliens couldn't understand how a species could survive while showing kindness to creatures that could potentially kill them. Mitchell slammed his fist on the table, his frustration boiling over. We're talking about the extinction of our species because aliens can't understand why we love our pets. But Foster saw something else in the alien observations, something that gave her the first glimmer of hope she had felt all day. Wait, they're not just studying our animals. They're studying our relationships with them. It means they're trying to understand us. Hayes nodded slowly, beginning to see where the president was heading. Dr. Zekthara's personal logs indicate she's fascinated by what she calls voluntary interspecies cooperation. She's never seen anything like it in their galactic surveys. The room erupted in angry voices as the council realized humanity's extinction might hinge on an alien's misunderstanding of a boy and his dog. But beneath the chaos, Foster was beginning to formulate a plan. If the aliens were fascinated by human-animal relationships, perhaps that fascination could be turned into their salvation. How long do we have? Foster asked, her voice cutting through the arguing voices around the table. Hayes checked his communication device, his face pale with the urgency of their timeline. Dr. Zekthara has agreed to a direct communication session in 72 hours. If we can't convince her that our relationship with animals represents cooperation rather than domination, she'll recommend immediate intervention. The countdown had begun. 72 hours to explain the unexplainable, to make alien minds understand. Something so fundamental to human nature that it defined who they were as a species. The future of humanity rested on their ability to communicate the simple truth that love, not fear, governed their relationship with the natural world as the Emergency Council prepared for the most important conversation in human history. Thing became crystal clear. The next 3 days would determine whether humanity's story ended in tragedy or triumph. The real battle for Earth's survival was about to begin. And their only weapons were words, compassion, and the hope that somewhere in the vast cosmos, intelligence and understanding could prevail over fear and misinterpretation. Just like how small acts of kindness can compound into massive changes over time. Humanity's relationship with animals might just save our entire species. Want to discover how the power of compounding can transform your own life? Check out our next video and learn how tiny daily actions can create extraordinary results. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the cramped laboratory as Dr. Lisa Thompson hunched over her computer screen, her bloodshot eyes scanning through thousands of pages of alien psychological profiles. Empty coffee cups littered her desk like monuments to her desperation, and the clock on the wall ticked past 3:47 a.m. with merciless precision. She had been working for 18 straight hours, driven by the desperate need to understand how Earth's observers thought, to find some crack in their logic that could save humanity from extinction. Thompson's fingers flew across the keyboard as she cross-referenced behavioral patterns, evolutionary timelines, and psychological assessments. The alien data was incredibly detailed, almost obsessively thorough in its analysis of human behavior. But there was something else buried in the files, something that had been nagging at her subconscious for hours. A pattern that didn't quite fit with the cold, clinical assessment of Earth as a weapons laboratory. Suddenly the pieces clicked into place like a lock opening. Thompson's eyes widened as the revelation hit her with the force of a lightning strike. The breakthrough she had been searching for wasn't hidden in the aliens. Its assessment of Earth's wildlife fit was in their assessment of their own evolutionary history. "I've got it," she shouted into her communication device, her voice echoing through the empty corridors of the research facility. The sound startled her exhausted team members who had been dozing at their workstations, their heads snapping up with a mixture of hope and confusion. "Director Hayes, General Williams, you need to hear this?" Thompson's voice cracked with excitement as she transmitted the emergency code that would summon the leadership team. After hours of dead ends and mounting despair, she had found something that could change everything. Within minutes, the emergency response team had assembled in the cramped laboratory. Director Hayes arrived first, his clothes rumpled from sleeping in his office chair, followed closely by General Williams, who looked like he had been pacing the halls all night. President Foster appeared on the secure video link from the White House Situation Room, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes alert with desperate hope. Thompson's discovery could mean the difference between war and peace, between humanity's survival and extinction. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as she prepared to share what she had learned. "The aliens evolved on peaceful worlds," she explained rapidly, her excitement barely contained as she pulled up comparative evolutionary charts on the main display. "Their most dangerous predator was equivalent to our house cat. They've never seen an ecosystem like ours where humans evolved alongside creatures that could kill them." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Hayes leaned forward, his mind racing through the possibilities. "You're saying they have no frame of reference for our relationship with dangerous animals?" "Exactly," Thompson confirmed, voice growing stronger with each word. "Look at this evolutionary timeline from their homeworld. Their apex predator was a creature about the size of a rabbit, with no natural weapons beyond sharp teeth. Their entire planet developed along peaceful lines, with cooperation being the primary survival strategy." Williams frowned, his military mind working through the tactical implications. "So they're scared of us?" "Terrified," Thompson confirmed, pulling up Dr. Zekthara's personal logs on the screen. "But here's the critical part, they're also fascinated. Dr. Zekthara's private notes show she's amazed that we achieved intelligence while sharing our planet with what she calls biological superweapons. You know what's really ironic about this whole situation? We've been worried about seeming primitive to advanced aliens, but it turns out we're actually the tough kids on the cosmic block. It's like finding out the school bully is actually afraid of you because you grew up in a neighborhood where the squirrels carry switchblades." Foster felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest for the first time since this crisis began. "Can we use that fascination to our advantage?" Thompson nodded enthusiastically, scrolling through more of the alien research files. "There's more. Dr. Zekthara has spent considerable time trying to understand how we survived our evolutionary journey. She's documented every major extinction event on Earth and noted that humans not only survived, but thrived alongside increasingly dangerous predators." The xenopsychologist highlighted specific passages from the alien scientist's logs, her voice growing more animated with each revelation. "She's particularly fascinated by our relationship with wolves. She can't understand how early humans not only survived encounters with pack hunters, but actually convinced them to become partners." Williams studied the alien analysis with growing amazement. "She's trying to figure out if we're incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "That's exactly right," Thompson confirmed. She's convinced that our relationship with animals represents either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity. If we can prove its confidence that we're powerful enough to coexist peacefully with dangerous creatures, they might see us as potential allies instead of threats. The room buzzed with nervous energy as humanity's fate balanced on a knife's edge. Foster could feel the momentum shifting, the first real hope they had experienced since learning of the alien threat. But she also understood that this revelation was just the beginning of their challenge. What specifically does she want to understand? Foster asked, her presidential instincts kicking in as she began to formulate a strategy. Thompson pulled up. More files, her excitement palpable. She's obsessed with what she calls voluntary interspecies cooperation. She's documented cases of humans risking their lives to save animals that could theoretically harm them. She's analyzed our wildlife, conservation efforts, our rescue operations, our rehabilitation programs. The implications were staggering. From the alien perspective, humans were either the most dangerous species in the galaxy or the most compassionate. They had achieved something that no other species in the aliens' experience had accomplished: true partnership with other life forms. There's something else, Thompson continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. She's particularly interested in our children. She documented dozens of cases where human children interact safely with animals that should, theoretically, be threats. She can't understand how a species can trust their most vulnerable members with potential weapons. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. The alien scientist wasn't just studying human-animal relationships. She was trying to understand the fundamental nature of humanity itself, their capacity for trust, their willingness to show vulnerability, their ability to see potential friends where others saw only threats. Hayes leaned back in his chair, slow smile spreading across his face. She's not just scared of us. She's envious of us. Exactly, Thompson confirmed. Her species achieved intelligence through isolation and caution. They avoided danger, eliminated threats, and survived through careful calculation. But we did something they never imagined possible. We turned our greatest threats into our greatest allies. Foster felt the weight of humanity's survival shifting from her shoulders to her heart. The solution wasn't about convincing the aliens that humans weren't dangerous. It was about showing them that danger and compassion could coexist, that strength didn't have to mean isolation, and that survival didn't require the elimination of all threats. How do we prove to them that our relationship with animals comes from confidence, not stupidity? Foster asked, her voice filled with new determination. Thompson's eyes gleamed with the fire of discovery. We show them something they've never seen before. We show them love in action, demonstrate that our bond with animals isn't based on domination or fear. It's based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The countdown to humanity's survival had taken on a new dimension. They weren't just racing against time. They were racing to prove that love was stronger than fear, that cooperation was more powerful than domination, and that the greatest strength came not from eliminating threats but from transforming them into friends. As the emergency team prepared for the most important presentation in human history, one thing became crystal clear: the next 72 hours would determine whether humanity's greatest strength would be recognized or misunderstood. The fate of 8 billion people rested on their ability to show that love, not fear, was the driving force behind human civilization. Understanding how small acts of compassion can compound into world-changing movements is just like understanding how tiny daily investments can transform your financial future. Want to discover how the power of compounding can revolutionize your life? Check out our next video and learn how small, consistent actions create extraordinary results over time. The massive alien research vessel, Harmony's Edge, hung in Earth's orbit like a crystalline cathedral, its translucent hull reflecting the blue marble of humanity's homeworld, 200 miles above the surface. The final confrontation that would determine the fate of 8 billion souls was about to begin. The shuttle carrying Captain Morrison, Dr. Carter, and Ambassador Patricia Wells approached the alien ship with the weight of species survival pressing down on their shoulders. Like a crushing mountain, Wells gripped the armrests of her seat as the shuttle's docking clamps engaged with an otherworldly hiss. Her diplomatic training had prepared her for hostile negotiations, cultural misunderstandings, and even life-threatening situations, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The woman who had successfully negotiated peace treaties between warring nations now faced the ultimate diplomatic challenge, convincing an alien civilization that humanity deserved to live. Captain, Orson checked his equipment one final time, his military bearing masking the terror coursing through his veins. The tablet in his hands contained humanity's last hope, thousands of videos and images showing the true nature of human-animal relationships. Dr. Carter clutched her research files with white knuckles, her scientific mind racing through every possible argument they might need to make. The airlock opened with a sound like distant thunder, revealing the interior of the alien vessel. The corridors were unlike anything human engineers had ever imagined, organic curves that seemed to breathe with their own life, walls that pulsed with gentle bioluminescent patterns, and an atmosphere that felt both alien and oddly welcoming. Dr. Zekthara awaited them in the ship's central chamber, her 12 eye stalks moving independently as they studied the humans with a mixture of fascination and fear. Her body was unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary history, a flowing, almost liquid form that seemed to shift and change as she moved. The translation device around her neck hummed softly as she prepared to speak. "You have 30 minutes to convince the Galactic Consortium that Earth should not be classified as a threat," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority. The countdown had begun, and every second that ticked by brought humanity closer to extinction. Wells stepped forward, her diplomatic instincts taking over despite the surreal nature of the situation. Her voice remained steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins like liquid fire. "Dr. Zekthara, you've misunderstood everything about us. We don't see our animals as weapons, we see them as family." The alien scientist's eye stalk swiveled, in apparent disbelief, her translation device crackling with static as she processed this statement. "Impossible. You cohabitate with apex predators. Your species shares living spaces with creatures capable of killing you. You know what's really wild about this moment? We're literally having to explain to aliens why we think puppies are cute instead of terrifying. It's like trying to convince someone that roller coasters are fun instead of death traps. Except the future of our entire species depends on it." Carter stepped forward, her voice filled with the passion of a lifetime spent studying the natural world. "'Cause we love them, we protect them. We've spent centuries learning to live in harmony with them, not dominate them." Her words carried the weight of every wildlife researcher who had ever risked their life to save an injured animal. Every veterinarian who had worked through the night to heal a wounded creature. Morrison pulled out his tablet, his fingers trembling. As he activated the display, a holographic projector filled the chamber with images of children playing with puppies, elderly people feeding birds in parks, and families camping in national forests. "This is who we are. We're not weapon masters. We're protectors." The images played in three-dimensional glory around them, a young girl gently petting a massive St. Bernard, an old man sharing his lunch with ducks at a pond, a family of 4 sleeping peacefully in a tent while deer grazed nearby. Each image told a story of trust, love, and peaceful coexistence that seemed to defy the alien understanding of predator-prey. Relationships. Zekthara's eye stalks swiveled in confusion as she studied the images. "But your species evolved alongside creatures that could destroy you. How did you survive? How did you achieve intelligence while surrounded by biological weapons?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything humanity believed about itself. Wells felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her as she prepared to answer the most important question in human history. "By learning to coexist," she replied firmly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "By becoming better than our base instincts. By choosing cooperation over domination." She gestured to the images still floating around them. "We survived because we learned that strength doesn't come from eliminating threats, it comes from transforming them into friends." Carter pulled up more data on her tablet, showing the alien scientist humanity's conservation efforts. We've spent millions of dollars and countless hours protecting species that could theoretically harm us. We've created national parks, wildlife refuges, and rescue organizations. We've risked our lives to save animals that most species would consider threats. The alien scientist was silent for long moments, her eye stalks moving independently as she processed this revelation. The translation device around her neck hummed with increasing intensity as she struggled to understand concepts that had no equivalent in her own civilization's experience. Morrison showed her videos of marine biologists swimming with sharks, wildlife researchers tracking tigers, and conservationists working with wolves. Look at this. We don't fear these creatures, we respect them. We study them not to exploit their weaknesses, but to understand their needs. The silence stretched on as Zekthera absorbed the implications of what she was seeing. Her entire species had achieved intelligence through careful avoidance of danger, through the systematic elimination of threats, but humanity had done something her civilization had never imagined possible. They had turned their greatest threats into their greatest allies. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with something that might have been awe. You've achieved something we thought impossible. You've turned a world of weapons into a world of wonder. The three humans exchanged glances, hardly daring to hope that their message had gotten through. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity's future lay in the stars or in extinction. Hours later, the consortium's final classification came through the communication system like a prayer answered. Earth. Unique, peaceful coexistence. Model. Recommended for Galactic Alliance membership. The relief that washed over the human delegation was almost overwhelming. Wells felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that humanity would survive, that children would continue to play with puppies, that families would continue to camp under the stars. As the alien vessel prepared to depart, Dr. Zekthera sent one final message that would echo through human history. We came to study your weapons and discovered your wisdom. The galaxy has much to learn from humanity. Morrison smiled as Earth's first intergalactic friendship began, watching the alien ship disappear into the vast cosmos with a sense of wonder that would never leave him. Apparently, we didn't need weapons after all. We just needed to be human. The story of humanity's first contact had ended not with conquest or destruction, but with understanding and hope. The species that had learned to love their fiercest predators had proven that compassion was the most powerful force in the universe, just like how small acts of kindness can compound into world-changing movements. Humanity's relationship with animals saved our entire species. Want to discover how the power of compounding can transform your own life? Check out our next video and learn how tiny daily actions can create extraordinary results that will amaze you. The end.